open to new experiences. There's definitely a fear, I think for me, it's really overcoming the fear of jumping into something new. We all get that, I believe. And I think it's the ability to try and push past that, especially with the movie. So we split it 50-50. So I spent $25,000 on this movie. And it's like, okay, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? And it can definitely be scary at times. But I just feel like, for people out there, really push yourself to do those new things and try those new things, and you'll never know what comes of it.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody. So Joel Mark Harris is a writer who doesn't just craft stories, he survives epic battles with them. His latest book, The Ivory General, is an 8-year journey of endurance, discipline, and passion. His path to becoming an award-winning, best-selling author was anything but easy. As a child, he was diagnosed with some learning disabilities. He feared he would never learn to read or write, but through sheer hard work and determination, Joel defeated the odds. He authored multiple books, ghostwritten 50 more, and even his feature film screened in New York Times Square. So in this episode, we're going to talk about his remarkable writing journey, how he transformed The Ivory General from an idea to an unforgettable historical novel with timeless themes. So get ready for an awesome episode in storytelling, resilience, and bringing the past to life on the page. Joel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Excited to have you on. You've definitely accomplished a bunch of stuff, and we have a lot of in common. We've both been ghostwriters, so it's going to be a fun episode. But yeah, let's start by talking about you and what kind of brought the Ivory General to life. I mentioned a little bit in the introduction there that you had a lot of challenges kind of getting into the writing world and all of that. So can you shine a little light on that?
Yeah, I'll start sort of like the idea of where the Ivory General came from. And I was
Perfect.
actually, this is a bit of embarrassing, but I was watching Spartacus, which is
Okay.
like, if you've never watched it before, it's like this kind of like high octane, like very much like rah-rah, show with gladiators and all that. And I found it very entertaining and thought that was it. And then I just did some research into like Spartacus, because I didn't actually, embarrassing, I didn't know much about Spartacus as a person. And I found that, obviously there's a lot of liberties taken with the show, but there was a lot of like factual things that happened. He broke away from his gladius, and he marshaled this army of slaves, and he actually defeated Rome in a bunch of battles. And so I was super fascinated by that. And then I looked around and got more and more into, kind of Rome and like what, Roman culture and all that. And, I've always been fascinated by history. And so, it was quite a, very like deep dive and focused in on, the subject. And then, I was like, reading a lot about Rome, and a lot of it was about, obviously the most famous ones like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and all that. And I was like, well, hold on here. There's a bunch of stories that aren't told a lot, that I think are fascinating. And one of them was Hannibal. We sort of know a lot about Hannibal, kind of, he marched through the Alps there and, attacked Rome. So I wanted to really focus on that kind of time period. And so I did a lot of research and studying and, kind of, um, looking at sort of what went into that time period. And yeah, it was just like super fascinating. And, we could talk about sort of the writing process, but, it took about 8 years for me to
Yeah.
finally get it done. So Yeah, what happened was I actually wrote this huge epic novel, and it was like, I don't know, it was like 1,000 pages long. And I shopped it around to different people, and they're like, "Well, Joel, this is way too long. You have to break it up." And so I went back and decided to, break it up into a trilogy. And so I rewrote the first part, and this is how I got the Ivory General.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's really fascinating to hear, being that, it didn't come from exactly like a learned experience or a certain topic, but more so something you like kind of stumbled into just by enjoying the show and then decided to do a little bit of research one day and you kind of fell down a rabbit hole and whoa, before you know it, you got a book in front of you. So that's
exactly. Yeah. I often do that. I just think about or come across topics. I'm like, oh, that would be a great book.
right. Yeah. And I'm
Hmm.
sure that kind of like led to what ended up making this a 7 year long journey. I
Hmm.
saw, in my notes here that you sent that, you actually ended up in the rabbit holes throughout the writing process itself. So I'm kind of picturing, your daily writing routine being like you're writing and then suddenly you find yourself researching something and then you're just in that hole of research. Is that kind of
Yeah.
how things went a little bit?
Yeah. So I try to be structured about it. I try and say, okay, Joel, this is the researching part, and then it's the story plotting part, and then the writing part, and it doesn't always line up that way.
Of course.
uh, just for example, I'm writing the second book, and then I'm going back and I'm like, oh, a prequel would be a great idea. Doing some research about what could happen before. I'm like, no, Joel, bad, go back to writing the second book, so it's trying to be disciplined and trying to be focused. It's not always easy.
Understood. Right. Well, you don't always have to be. I think as an author, a lot of people listening today could probably understand you don't have to follow like a rigid schedule for getting your book out there. You can do what works best for you. And maybe for you, I guess, your process was kind of going back and forth, following your passions, learning a little bit more about it. And I mean, here you are today. Maybe if you were to write the next book, then, to kind of isolate the silos of like research versus writing, but you got to do what works for you. So
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So that being said, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the book itself. I mean, the core lesson in the story seems to be that you can win battles but still lose the war, politics, business, personal life. So, don't
Hmm.
spoil anything, but can you share some examples of
Yeah.
it?
So, I'm a big proponent of history can really teach us about modern life. And by studying, what happened in the past, we can take those lessons and really apply them today. And I think one of the biggest things with the Second Punic War is Hannibal won all of his battles. He defeated the Rome soundly, except for the last battle. And I think sort of what we can take away from that is just because we seem to be doing well or we seem to be on the right track doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. And so I think it's all, but also on the flip side, if we feel like we're not doing well or we're struggling, whatever the case, if it's writing, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're on a path to failure. I
Right.
think that's it's a kind of an interesting dichotomy that, especially in today's society, in terms of like social media, we feel like, oh, we look at all these people and they're all doing well and they're all super successful. And kind of same thing with Hannibal. It's like he seemed like he was doing super well. He was winning all his battles. He was defeating Rome. The Rome was running scared, yet they ended up losing. We're not speaking Carthaginian today. We're speaking forms of Latin. And I think that's
Mhm.
very interesting because if Carthage had won, I think that life could potentially be a lot different than it is today. Would be, probably speaking some sort of Carthaginian or something. English would, sound very different. Um, but yeah, I just think I think one of like the biggest takeaways is that we aren't we feel like we're in a certain place in life. We feel like we're either doing super well, or we're not doing well, or I wish this was happening in my life, or it's not. Um, but we need to take a bigger view, I think, of kind of where we're at. And just because we've had some failures and or had some successes, even right, doesn't necessarily mean that we are quote a failure or a success. So I think that's like the big kind of modern takeaway from the book.
Understood. So I love that. It's not just a story that like, you found interesting and you took the research and put it on a page, but like you wove a story out of it, a lesson for everyone to kind of learn and adapt from. So
Hmm.
that's great that you have that in place for people to have an understanding after they enjoy the story. But what was the phrasing you used when you said you were watching the show before? Like it just kind of like the action vibes. It's not just action; it has like meaning. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's great. But this actually isn't your only book. I mean, you've been a ghostwriter, written over 50 books too. So I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about that. I mean,
Yeah.
know what it's like to finally have the triumph of writing your own book or really wanting to, but there's also the side of it that's fun to tell other people's stories too. So
Hmm.
what's that about?
Yeah, so I sort of fell funny. I fell into ghostwriting just as I kind of fell into this book. I owned a marketing firm, and at the beginning it was just myself and this other my co-founder. He was more tech savvy than I was. I was the writer. And so we started doing websites, and we would build websites. He'd do all like the tech back end, and I would write and, kind of make it look pretty.
Right.
um, and we became fairly successful, and we started to grow the company. We added, more employees, and I found that I was managing these other employees rather than doing what I was, which I love, which is the writing. And so I actually sold my shares back to the company, and I, kind of went off and was going to do my own thing. And a friend of mine is like, "Oh, Joel, you're not doing anything. Great. You can help me write this book." Right. And so I was like, okay, sure. And that's how I started out with the ghostwriting. And so I just kind of, use my skills as a marketer to sort of build up a client base. And, yeah, now written all. And I think the fascinating thing about the ghostwriting is that I've written children's books, self help, business, autobiography. And what's most fascinating to me is learning other people's life, and what struggles they went through and what challenges they faced. It's been an amazing process, and I love it. And it's just so great to really be able to tell other people's stories, and being able to capture that into a book, something that they can, either if they want to sell, publicly to the masses, or if it's just something that they want to, hand out to their grandchildren.
Right. Well, that's so cool that, you've been through that. And I know exactly what you mean by that. And you never know what you're going to stumble into when you're in the ghostwriting world. You can, be writing about one topic or another, but you always learn something from it, and it always has meaning too. So
Hmm.
cool. And I love how you also stumbled upon it as well. I think that kind of seems to be your pattern, like just
Yeah.
into things.
Yeah, being open to new possibilities, I think, is very important.
Yeah. And is that then how the screenplay came to be, the one that was featured in New York?
Funny, funny enough, yeah. So I have a friend, and we met through soccer, and he was an actor, and his parents had a farm that was going to be sold. And he's like, "Joel, this is a great place to set a movie." And so I wrote a screenplay for this movie. It was based on both of our lives at the time, and so it was like a kind of he was from Switzerland, and so it's a bit of an immigrant story, but also like I threw some of my stuff in there as well. And yeah, we just felt self-financed the entire thing. I think the total budget was something around $50,000. And at first it didn't do anything. It was quite the learning experience, learning like the different steps. I went in completely blind, which I don't recommend, by the way. Um, but yeah, we learned about how to edit a film, how to like color correct it, how to market it, finding a agent to distribute it. um, and then yeah, at first, I remember the first screening of the film. It was in a small little town called Beloit in Wisconsin. And we were so excited. We were like, super excited to be there. And oh, our film got accepted into this film festival. And we went there, and there was two people in the audience, and we were like so crushed. We're like, oh man, this, like, all this money spent and all this time, and like, why are we doing this? But we just kept at it, and we kept submitting it to different film festivals. We kept submitting it to different awards, and eventually it just kind of gathered steam. I think, that first film festival really helped us promote it to other film festivals and to awards. And in the end, we won 15 awards. Best like cinematography, best director, a couple, bunch of those. And yeah, it got screened all across the world. It got screened in China, Switzerland, Europe, the United States. But yeah, I think kind of the moment that really stood out to me was it was in the New York Times Film Festival. And what they had done is they set up these huge bleachers in Times Square, this big projector, and they played different movies, and a movie got played there, and it was like, it's just like such a surreal experience being surrounded by these big tall buildings and being on these bleachers, and people would stop, they would be walking and they'd stop and they'd sit down and watch the movie, and that was like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. So yeah, that was like, yeah, such a fascinating and really kind of meaningful, I think, experience for me.
Yeah, and it is really funny. That kind of just continues with the pattern that you've been teaching us here. Just you fell into things that you don't quite know everything about. You learn through the process, doing your research, and yeah, it just opens the doors to new experiences. So I guess what we can say here is that, as an overlying message in your life is that don't turn away opportunities, give it a try, and work through the challenges. Would you say that's
Yeah.
kind of the
Yeah,
pattern?
yeah, definitely be open to new experiences. Um, there's definitely a fear, I think for me, it's really overcoming the fear of jumping into something new, right? We all get that, I believe. And I think
Yeah.
it's the ability to try and push past that. And I think, yeah, especially with the movie spending, so we split it 50-50. So I spent $25,000 on this movie, and it's like, okay, well, that's like, why am I like, what am I doing, like, why am I doing this? And uh sort of try to make the money back. And yeah, it can definitely be scary at times, but I just feel like if you don't try, and this kind of, maybe it's a little bit cliche, but like, it's, you know, you have to try. Otherwise, like, life is boring, I think. You don't want to go through like a mundane life. And so try new experiences, because it's really easy to get caught in that box, and really easy to not try new things, and be kind of every day sort of the same. But I think, for people out there, really, push yourself to do those new things and try those new things, and you'll never know what comes of it.
I love that. And that's such an inspiring message to kind of just encompass everything that you've done, especially because I mean, you're absolutely right. Lots of people can be stuck in a rut. Like they like to be in their comfortable patterns, come home at the end of the day of work, lay on the couch, watch some Netflix, but you are kind of the one who, does something different and changes things and improves yourself. I mean, who else can sit down at a dinner party and be like, yeah, my film is screened in New York, right? Or I have like 50 books out there, and my book's the bestseller. So amazing stuff. And I think hopefully everybody here can learn something from you today from that. But kind of circling back then to the book itself, where can people find it and pick it up and check it out?
Yeah, so it's going to be available to purchase beginning of March.
Oh,
It's going to be on the all the available platforms: Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, here in Canada, Chapters. So yeah, anywhere that you can get your books, it will be there.
well, okay, there you go. So I guess we have to kind of stay in touch up until that release date then. Where can people get in contact with you? What's the best handle?
Yeah, so if you go Joel Mark Harris, pretty much I show up everywhere. But I think my website is probably the best place. It's joelmarkharris.com. That's my author website. For if you want to check out like my ghostwriting, it's ghostwritersandco.com. But yeah, all the usual places: TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. It's Joel Mark Harris. Just search me and it should come up.
Okay, well, perfect. Guys, we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today. So click on over and get in the know. Before we wrap up today, Joel, I think it's important for us to talk about some writing tips. So, what are some things that you would recommend that other authors give a try that worked for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's setting a goal and then working back. So if I want to write a 30,000 word novel, then how many words do I need to accomplish that in a day. I like to write 2,000 words. So what I do is I get up in the morning before I do any client work, before I do anything else. Sometimes I check emails. I try not to, but yeah. So I write 2,000 words in the morning when I'm fresh, when I'm ready to like have the most creative in the morning, and really just block out everything, put on my music, and just I think especially for the first draft, just pound out those 2,000 words. Don't worry too much about anything. I don't even worry about spelling, grammar, if it makes sense. Just making sure I hit that goal. The first draft is always the toughest. So once you have that first draft, then you can go back, you can rework it, rewrite it. But yeah, just making sure that you get that first draft done, I think is probably the most important, because that's the hardest part. Getting over that hump, everything after that is a lot easier.
Understood. I think I can totally relate to that. I get it. You try to prioritize other people's projects first, especially as a ghostwriter. It's what's important. But then, yeah, you need to set that time for yourself. So I like that you kind of set that block of time in the morning. So like focusing solely on your projects, and that's how it got to be. And so anyone listening today, if you're sitting on that book idea, don't, just keep pushing it back. Just carve out the time, right?
Yeah, you got to schedule it. So important. Gotta schedule that writing time. I use Google Calendar, and so it's just fairly easy just blocking out that time. But whatever works for people.
Exactly. So okay, yeah, that's a lot that everyone can learn from. It's perfect. Um, so we've talked about a lot of your projects today. We talked about your book, we talked about your ghostwriting, and also the movie. But what else might be on the horizon for you? I feel like you're not quite done with your endeavors. So what can people be excited for
So
moving forward?
yeah, having looked into Carthage, I find it such a fascinating civilization, and it's not something that people know about. Hannibal's the most famous, crossing the Alps, as I mentioned, but
Mhm.
there's so many other different parts of Carthaginian history that are super fascinating. It should rival some of the best, like the greatest sort of ancient civilizations in the Mediterranean. Ancient Greece, ancient Egyptian, of course, ancient Rome, but we don't know a ton about the civilization, uh, because Carthage was wiped out, and with it, all the records, all the history of Carthage was gone, and so we only know Carthage through secondhand sources or through the writings of the Greeks and the Romans. So I really want people to know about Carthage. I want people to study it more. This is where it goes back to, kind of looking at prequels and other types of books I can write. So I've got a whole bunch of books I can write about Carthage. It's almost an endless well of ideas and opportunities, right? And so I hope to write more about Carthage, about sort of ancient times before the Second Punic War and before, I guess, the rise of Rome.
Okay, I love that. Just continuing with your passion and learning more about the civilization and, continuing your work. That's a great thing that we can be on the lookout for. So I guess what people can do is just click on the links in the description box, get connected with you, and stay in the know and be ready for what's next. I love it. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, any other last bits of advice before I wrap up today, or any words of wisdom to leave everyone with as they continue on with their days?
I think just keep on going. I think if there's, the theme of sort of falling into sort of ideas and opportunities, but also just persevering through the hard time. My writing is, I think, mediocre. I don't claim to be an amazing writer, but what I've done is push through that fear, push through that uncertainty, and just kept going. And I think, that's where a lot of people get stopped, is not being able to push through that. So I think, if you want to write that book, if you want to, get to that next level, just push through it, just keep going, and you'll eventually get there. And I think, you know, I've tried to do that through my work and through whatever opportunities that have come my way.
Understood. That's perfect. That's a great way to kind of wrap everything else up today. So thank you so much. It's been a really interesting conversation. And I think what we can all learn again through hard work and resilience, you've been able to accomplish all these things and also just keeping that open door. So a lot of inspiring stuff here today, folks. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, yeah, and I have no doubt that our listeners will be captivated by the story and themes we brought to life in the Ivory General. So, guys, be on the lookout for the release. Get connected. Connect on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the nine. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us on the episode of Authors on Mission. We'll be back next time with another writer's unique journey. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, and keep growing. We'll see you next time, everyone. Have a great day.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.